Hello, and welcome to the ozone. Hi, Zaina.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. Let's do the small pleasantries. How's your day?
It was nice, just another day at the office.
Another day at the office, right? So, another day at the office, we can just segue right into are you a human or are you a bot when you're at the office? I mean, we want to explore what it means to be human.
Well, if being a bot is just doing a task repeatedly, well, I guess somehow I'm working in software engineering, so one could argue that a lot of work that has to do with well, not just engineers, but anyone that's doing work on a computer or using technology arguably is maybe having some bot-like parts of their day of just kind of being in the routine, but overall, I would definitely not say I'm fully a bot, definitely
Yeah.
human, but that doesn't mean that there's definitely a crossover sometimes, or it feels like there's a crossover sometimes.
Right. So, I think that's what we'll try to explore today. You claim to be human. We'll try to find out what that actually means. And, with all the talk of AI, generative AI, LLMs, general intelligence, or is it general artificial intelligence? I forget which one. Again, a lot of concepts swirling around, and there's certainly been a lot of change in the last few years that has got us all thinking. So I read an article a couple of days ago, and it just reminded me that ChatGPT was released in November of 2022.
Yeah.
That makes it 3 years ago. Uh, it doesn't 3 years is not an incredibly long time, but it feels like a lot of things have changed in 3 years, but I think that a lot of things have changed even in the last year to year and a half. It feels like we're on a bit of an exponential, change curve. Um, do you remember using ChatGPT for the first time?
Yes, generally, I really distinctly remember the shift of pre-ChatGPT and well, I guess currently ChatGPT and the Gen AI normalization into all of our lives, especially in school. So for context, I graduated high school in 2021, and so throughout all of my time in high school, there was no such thing, at least widely used. Like there was no concept of, oh yeah, like ChatGPT can do your homework or help you write your essay or fill in the blank. There was no, to my knowledge, no form of this that was like publicly available. And in college too, my freshman year, which would be 2021 to 2022, there was no like it was just normal school, what you would expect college to be like. And yeah, sure, people were always finding ways to kind of skirt the system or cheat, but none of it really had to do with AI or generative content, I guess you could say. But I distinctly remember because my sophomore year, which was the next year, November 2022, that era that you're talking about, that's when I started taking computer science classes. And so my beginning to take computer science classes coincided with the advent of just the spike of, like, LLMs and Gen AI tools, and so I distinctly remember, like, for example, maybe not so much in the first semester in the fall, but definitely in the spring, a few months later, I was in a class, Data Structures and Algorithms. It's a very fundamental computer science class. These are the kind of concepts that kinda stay with you as you go through all your professional interviews, etcetera, and so having the tool at your disposal was very new, and it almost felt a little bit unclear, like, what the extent was to which we were allowed to use it, and at the same time, it was extremely helpful, and I remember just being sometimes stuck on a problem and just being thoroughly confused in class about something, specifically these really theoretical concepts, and then kind of sheepishly kind of taking the step to ChatGPT and asking, and then being very pleasantly surprised by what it could provide. Whereas before you just kinda had to struggle through, um, on your own or talk to other people, but yeah, you could scour the internet, but this was a kind of a different experience.
So that tracks and that kind of makes sense using it for computer science material early on, but you're also a history major, right? You did a dual major, and so this is where it gets interesting. So let's just start exploring a little bit of, we don't even have to get that um, deep in the weeds on the science of it. Just, try to keep it a little bit at a layperson level. What makes a history paper? Like, how it seems like a magic trick that generative AI can write a paper,
Right.
but and just to kind of lay some context, right? I mean, the very broad strokes definition of how it's trained is, well, you have this generative AI capability. What that means is essentially it's a prediction machine.
Yeah.
And so if you have the analogy of monkeys on a typewriter, for people that don't know what a typewriter is, it's the thing that your keyboard comes from. Anyway, I think everybody knows what a typewriter is. The point is, you start randomly typing stuff, and it's all gibberish. And at some point, um, if you start creating words that are actually, let's say you're writing it in English, and so those are English words, but then the words themselves individually make sense, but they don't make sense strung together. So you essentially are training the system to predict the next word
Right.
given a whole context of preceding words. And it's trained by looking at all available content on the internet. Think of reading every single Wikipedia page and think it's like whatever's out on the internet, it's magically scoured and predicted on. How is writing a history paper as a human being much different than that?
I guess from that view, maybe not so different. So I guess I would say just taking a step back, like when one writes a history paper, any kind of analytical paper, I guess you could say, but I'll focus on history. There's kind of two main components. So the first component is obviously the historical aspect of your paper. So usually you're rooted in a specific region, a specific time in history, um, a specific kind of focus. So maybe that would be like military history, foreign affairs, or economic or political, social. There's so many kinds. So that's kind of like your groundwork, right? And then what makes a history paper not just like a summary or a Wikipedia article is that there's supposed to be some sort of argument that's being made. So that's what the person writing, the historian, the student, whoever, the person composing the paper is basically trying to put forth some sort of argument, and argument is kind of a broad word, but I guess we could say it's maybe trying to introduce a way of looking at the event, a way of interpreting the event, or trying to just highlight some nuance of the event that might have been less studied, or kind of pretty much anything. So from that framework, yeah, so like all the historical information, how do historians research? How do students research? We use the internet. We use all of our online resources. I mean, we have our libraries and all the academic sources that, your school provides, but a lot of research does happen online, especially as more and more works get digitized. So, like, even those library sources are most of the time digitized. Like, JSTOR is common. It's a basically a our online collection of scholarly journal articles. Ebooks are digitized, like just a bunch of stuff. Primary sources, a lot of primary sources, letters, articles, correspondences, just any eyewitness account. These are all online. So the point being that from a perspective of historical context, like sure, an AI model, if it's being trained off of the internet, is going to have all of that information. Um, Now, the argument itself, what it would highlight, what it thinks the argument would be. I'm less experienced with maybe understanding how it would form the argument, because an argument is less of like we could talk about that. Is an argument like kind
Yeah.
of predicting the next word, or is it some sort of imaginative kind of process? But hey, people are
And I
writing
guess,
their essays with AI, so it's kind of being done.
sure, sure. And I guess just kind of digging into that a little bit, it's also relatively early goings
Sure.
in AI. We've also made tremendous progress. And so what is not possible today, who's to say it won't be possible X amount of time from now, whether it's next year or in the next 3 years, what have you. But I think it's interesting to start digging into, but what is learnable or teachable versus what is um what is thought, or like what is an original thought. So what is an original thesis versus you read 70 research papers out there and you can regurgitate them to an extent and make it sound original, but essentially it's just mashing those 70 sources together. And
Yeah.
you can argue we've all been there, whether it's high school or college or what have you. I mean, there's a version of that, you know, we all went through. Some of us were better students than others. I mean, some of us maybe panicked the night before and, read a bunch of paper and smashed words together,
Yeah.
not unlike AI. Um, Maybe they weren't the best papers, they were passable, but it does interesting get into, like, what is human thought and what is possible. So as an example, like, we take a lot of things for granted. We take navigation for granted. You get on and you ask Siri or whatever to like take you to your friend's house, and it gives you directions magically. And you're too young to remember. You probably weren't even born then. In fact, you weren't born. But like, there was a time where we didn't have that, and you actually
Yeah.
had to figure that stuff out, and you had to look on a map, and you had to remember directions, and it was almost, it's like that was what it meant to be human. And it turns out, well, a robot can do that. And I'm using the word robot very broadly. So at some level, we are getting replaced with the things that we're able to do. But as we continue in those strides, it's just an interesting thought to start asking, well, what is it that actually makes us human versus a repetitive task that can be repeated? Like a washing machine can wash your clothes. At one point, humans used to do that. I doubt that anybody would complain that their humanity has been robbed from them because the washing machine is washing their clothes.
Right. Well,
What
sorry.
do you think about original thought? Like, where is original thought coming from? What is original thought?
Well, I mean, what's original, I guess? Perhaps we are all just resynthesizing ideas that we've learned, or, you take your experience or your what you're learning and you're coming up with something new in quotes, but what is new? I'm not sure. But I guess maybe rather than original thought, it's more just like just the thought itself, like thinking. Like when I'm thinking right now, well, it's hard to kind of describe fully, but I feel like I'm not thinking, okay, I'm saying the word the. What is the next most likely word I'm gonna say? I'm instead thinking more in concepts, less in probabilities, which again, I don't know how technical you or I are gonna get or know, but in a nutshell, that is what these it's a predictive model basically, right? Like when an LLM is, and hopefully I'm using that correctly, is like generating text. And
Yeah.
so, or content. So it's a very fundamentally, I feel like, different way of forming ideas where like one is kind of like, okay, what's most likely? Whereas I'm not thinking in probabilities. I'm just thinking. Which is not I don't know how helpful that is, but like
Yeah.
it's different.
Well, that's interesting though, because then, so the example that comes to mind for me is the end product versus the process for the product,
Sure.
right? So let's think about flying. I think we can all agree that a Boeing 737 is not a bird,
Yes.
but it does fly, and it goes from point A to point B. And the mechanics that it uses to do that are very different than how birds fly. But it does travel through the air, and by virtue of that, human beings are able to fly.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Is we're not necessarily trying to replicate in that scenario the exact mechanics of the flight of birds. We're just trying to replicate the act of flying, traveling from point A to point B via the air. So in that way, yeah, maybe LLMs and computers, they're going to go about the process of synthesizing thought a different way than you or I would in our biological brain, but the end product could be very similar. And so I think that brings to mind this notion of, okay, so what is human? What is uniquely human or not? Is it just a collection of words that make sense? I think that's pretty much been proven that that's not necessarily a very human trait, because we're literally watching computers do that as we
Right.
speak.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say is I feel like the reason why maybe the focus, which I'll answer your question in a second, but the focus is on the process and not necessarily the end product is because I think what's being marketed to us or what's being framed right now is, oh, it's not just the fact that, like, for example, in a tech perspective, it's not just the fact that like an AI agent can write the same and code as a person. It's that, oh wait, like they're okay, wait, maybe not code, but it's kind of the fact that, oh, they're thinking like you,
Right.
and they're thinking like a person. And I feel like the reason why I think that is being so scrutinized is because that's what's being sold to us. And so I feel like every time there's a new tool that's being onboarded at work or a new product comes out just in the public, it's not just the product of like what it can do that is being analyzed, it's also like how it does it because that is kind of what we think is going to replace us. But to answer your question, like as we're seeing, you know, AI can generate beautiful essays. AI can generate, really elegant code, can do a lot of amazing things that humans can do, and maybe can do things with less flaws in terms of end product as humans. But for example, this just happened today. Um, I was working with Copilot, which is a interactive tool you can use in your coding editor, and I was just asking some questions, going back and forth, and I kinda hit an epiphany with one of the responses that Copilot gave me. And just out of instinct, or I don't even know what the word is, like, it's almost like you're texting a friend, I just wrote OMG and I clicked enter because I was so excited about this epiphany. And the response was just, "Sorry, like, I don't know how to interpret that," or like, "Do you need any more help?" And so that might sound very like trivial or small, but I think when you're working with someone and you kind of hit that breakthrough together, you kind of celebrate or you say yay or you say, "Oh my god, I never thought about this before." And there's kind of that the experience
Right.
of working through the problem, of solving the problem, and you just cannot like the AI like model just doesn't understand emotion or experience. It just doesn't understand like that like wonderful moment of, like, solving a problem or getting through your rut. And so
Oh.
that was just something that happened today, like a small example, but it just didn't know why I would write OMG when I found out something really exciting that would help me carry on with my work. So that's just
No,
one example.
no, but that's actually a great point. That's actually a really great point about emotion. I would say that expressing or forget expressing, first you have to feel emotion.
Yeah,
Feeling emotion, I would characterize that as a uniquely human constraint, at least in the year 2025. Who knows, maybe 100 years from now or 10 years from now, somebody will figure out what an emotion is. But I think that, along with morality and a will, so free will, morality, and emotion are, I think, fundamental to the human experience. Which actually, if you think about it, those are those are the things that pretty much every religion also tries to have guidance on. So that would be, it's the commandments aren't thou shalt not use the past participle in, well, I don't know, whatever, some grammar rule.
right.
It's thou shalt not hate or thou shalt not covet, which are again feelings and emotions. So that's an interesting point. Then the other piece of it is the notion of, like, right now, as excited as we're getting about it, and I recognize this early, the tools are only doing what you tell them to do,
Yes.
which maybe is no different than maybe you're doing what your manager tells you to do, right? I mean, so there is that aspect of it, but that is also something interesting about general intelligence, where what's an entrepreneur? It's somebody that observes the environment
Right.
and then extracts out a need and then does something about it. So, I mean, that is general intelligence. And so coming up with novel ideas, I think this is where it starts to get like, yeah, I don't know if I can articulate what a novel idea is.
Sure.
Uh, but we start to kind of reach into that. Maybe we'll find out it's not that unique at all. And maybe it is emotion and will and morality. Those are the frontiers.
Well, yeah. So what you said about, for example, the entrepreneur, right? Like they're in their environment and they see a problem and then they want to solve the problem, or they say, hey, like this is the missing piece, my product or my idea is going to help. But their environment, the entrepreneur or the human's environment is so vast that, like, for example, not to state the obvious, but like when you're interacting with a online interface with a with generative AI, it's in your screen in your device, in the ether of whatever you wanna call it, the digital, right? Like, there's a lot of probably technical, uh, phrasing of how to say it, but, like, you can't like, the ChatGPT or Claude or whoever can't just, like, walk into your kitchen and say, "Hey, I think there could be another new appliance that would help people, like make smoothies better or something. Or I think that there's a tool that could help people get to work on time, or just like different things that like we all experience because we're living and experiencing things and doing things and feeling things that we see. I mean, at this point, I'm not even saying it can't happen. I just am curious, like how something like an AI model is supposed to experience, like, what it means to, like, have to wake up to your alarm in the morning and wanna go back to bed, or what it feels like to, feel good when you're, like, taking a run or going on, some exercise, or what it means to, like, have a nice yummy dessert after a long, stressful day. Like, those are the kinds of thing among, like, talking to family and friends and experiencing highs and lows, like, those are the things that I just don't understand. I understand, like, just I'm curious to know how this would even be approached for, like, making these models and these kinda technological tools human, right? Because those are the things that
So
make.
are you challenging OpenAI to create a social media influencer bot?
I mean, so it's funny you say that because I think this is not the same thing as an content creator bot, but I think a couple years ago, like, Twitter tried to have some bot or kinda like a. Okay, might be butchering this, but I learned about this in a class, like, and very quickly, like, just supposed to like respond to certain things, and really quickly it just started to become really hateful. I'll try to
Mm,
find the example of this because basically it was being trained on the internet, and the internet can be a really vile place. And
mm,
so, unfortunately, it was supposed to be this like kind of cutesy, like kind of neutral uh Twitter bot, and it just kind of like a profile basically, and it just turned into like this racist, like every ism you can think of, like
mm.
vehemently negative kind of like figure, which is very odd. But yes, just to answer your point too of yeah, maybe this is an open challenge because hey, like sure you can try to replace some of our work, some of the or enhance some of the work, but there's a lot more to people. Although maybe corporations don't want us to see ourselves like this, but there's a lot more to humans than just like going to work and
Yeah.
being yeah.
So it's fascinating what captures our attention and we focus on it because as you're speaking, I'm looking at you
Okay.
and you sound human and you look human and it's occurring to me, I'm just staring at a screen.
Right. It's
You're
yeah,
not
it's
actually there.
odd.
I'm seeing a representation of you in pixels and the sound is coming through my AirPods
Yeah.
through the air, like, so my point is that even though speech and thought are human characteristics, or at least, we're like the conveyance or the representation of that is not. I mean, it's just, I was just curious the other day, and I don't know why, like 35 years later, I started thinking about high school physics. And I was like, wait, what is a wave again? And just kind of fascinating. Like, how does a radio signal work? Like, I grew up listening to FM tunes on the radio driving around. It's like, it's actually, if you start really thinking about it, it's very, I don't even know what the adjective is. It's just kind of like there's just waves and radio signals and magnetic all around us.
Yeah.
And God knows what they're carrying. But we then have a receiver or something. So anyway, I'm just going down a tangent. All I'm trying to get at is right now, we're very focused on this thing that is AI, but actually there's been so much technological progress. It's over the last 100 years. It's actually mind boggling, right? I
Yeah.
think the difference that's hitting is, and so this is an interesting way to look at it. And I'm one of the people that has come down on this side of like, oh my God, is AI going to wipe out humanity? And I'm not even necessarily thinking that it's going to wipe out humanity, as in like, God, what are the movies like? HAL 2000, or the Matrix, Skynet, or what have you? Something that takes over and destroys humanity. I'm kind of coming at it as societal destruction from erosion of the social contract, where people are not able to earn a living,
Sure.
and you have mass upheaval due to that. Not so much a intelligent AI, something that's going to destroy humanity. It's almost like humans figuring out a way to shoot ourselves. We're very good at that. We're very good at destroying ourselves. And the issue is that the rapid rate of change that AI is bringing, and you can project out into the white collar workspace, is unsettling all of us because, well, I'm closer to retirement than you are. You probably should be worried more than I am. I'm just hoping I can, like, ride out the next 10, 15 years and just call it a day. But another way to look at that problem is it's a minimum wage problem. I mean, so there's always a minimum wage that we introduce in society, right? To say what's a, and again, just to be clear, we're speaking in a very U.S. centric
Sure.
society. The other society, there's no such thing as minimum wage, and even over here, it wasn't always the case. But again, speaking of the here and now in U.S. centric society, we have a minimum wage concept, and the idea is that you need to pay a fair wage. And all of a sudden, what you've done with AI and unleashing AI is you've basically found a way to circumvent that minimum wage and destroy the social contract. I think that is the biggest threat right now to the stability of society, not so much, a sentient bot taking over and destroying us.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that though, because a lot of the work that AI is trying to automate is salaried work or not necessarily like from a wage. And another thing, I mean, I agree with kind of the overall.
I'm saying minimum wage. I'm saying that, I mean, my point is like, yes, because you just think of minimum wage. Oh, salaried white collar workers are way above up on the totem pole. But the point is, it's like reaching right up to the very top. You don't
Sure,
need
sure.
paralegals. You don't need software engineers. So,
Right. And the one thing I'll say though is that, and this, I do generally agree with your sentiment. I'll just add to that by saying that one thing for sure though is that there's never a free, like, there's no free, what's the word? There's no free lunch. Is that the phrase?
mm,
Like, there's still a cost to using these tools. It's not just $0 or it's not just some infinitely cheaper thing. I myself don't have the specifics on like the mathematical model of the finances of a completely or mostly AI workforce versus human, but I would say that, for example, you know, it's really expensive to basically operate a data center. It's really expensive to like train these models. It's really expensive. Like when I say expensive, I'm not just saying like financially, like yes, but also environmentally, like specifically with water and electricity. Like these are really energy intensive endeavors. And so sure, you could maybe get away with paying less to upkeep those services versus a person, but it's like some free magic thing. So, for example, for anyone listening who is more familiar with like this concept, like I recently was taking a tour of a data center in my office building, and the tour guide just said something really interesting where he said that everyone thinks of, cloud technology and the cloud as being just this magical fantasy place that doesn't actually exist. And he said, that's not true. Like it does, maybe we don't see it. But like all things related to technology or the internet or what have you, the Wi Fi signal, invisible waves, there is a physical component. We just don't see it. So he said, your Amazon Web Service server like instance that you don't see, that's just magic to you. It's a physical piece of metal or steel somewhere else in a different room, maybe in Virginia with a bunch of AC going on. So a lot of this has been abstracted. Like, for example, we can maybe dive into this later on, but like what is like an LLM? Like what is a model? What does that even mean? Like physically speaking, is there like everything has some sort of physical component, right? Like what is it? So there's a
mm,
lot of stuff that gets abstracted because we're only presented with like one kind of interface. But there's kind of so much more to the story in any situation. Like for example, to the point of the radio signal example, like I don't think I could formally even, like, begin to articulate the exact workings of, like, how Wi-Fi works. Like, I know what it is, and I know that if I'm not connected to it, I'm using, data or service, but like, what does that even mean? Like it's into our jargon. It's like you kind of know generally how to drive a car, but you don't actually know how the car works. So this is just kind of, I think it's either we're going to have to get comfortable with not knowing everything and just kind of take whatever the tools we have are at face value, or we're just going to have to like get into these rabbit holes to the point where maybe it's not even possible to keep up with how everything works.
Yeah, I think part of it is that it's not possible to keep up because that's the bedrock of progress of humanity. And you basically abstract out a layer and then you just build on top of that without having to worry about. I mean, you are sitting in a building right now.
Right.
Whatever floor you're on, there's like if you actually start to think about it, you're like floating up in the air,
Yeah.
right? What's holding you up? How did that elevator work that you came up? And actually, the most magical thing is the thing that powers everything that we do in our current society, which is electricity. Do you even understand how? I mean, again, that's one of the Wikipedia, like, that's again one of my 35-year-old physics. It's like, oh wait, I remember something about electricity, and wait, how does a motor work again, and why does it work? The interesting thing about it is, uh, if in I don't know 1,000 years from now, who knows, will the world even be around? If it is, what will people know about our civilization? You dig up relics, anthropology, you dig up pieces of art. Like, you're just gonna dig up like pieces of metal. You had like 500 gigs worth of pictures in some phone, but there's no electricity, and so it's just like there's nothing in there. It's all there, but there's nothing there. So that
Right.
you brought up electricity and the environmental footprint. I think that actually is a very interesting and concerning piece of the puzzle. How do we sustain that? And then the other piece of it, I brought up the social contract. Again, you're too young to remember this, but other people who have lived through economic cycles, boom busts. There was a subprime mortgage and the financial crash of 2008, where it was like, oh my gosh, this is a new economy. This is the new rules. And we had the dot com 2000, was it 99, 2000 boom and bust. Um, the point is that you are even now everybody's talking about, oh my gosh, AI is going to do this, that, or the other, and it can deliver a lot. But if it comes at the expense of eliminating swaths of jobs without any replacement,
Yeah.
who's going to buy all those cheap goods and services? We're a consumerist society. You can produce things for cheap. Who's going to buy them?
I don't know, and yeah, like the cheap goods, yes, but also things like your Netflix subscription and,
Sure.
I don't know, just like okay, that's the only thing I can think of right now, but there's just I'm looking at my desk, there's lotion and there's, hair products and there's books and there's,
Sure.
all this different stuff, and of course, like the cheaper goods too, but yeah, like I think that's for me what's the hardest part to understand is like and maybe it's not there's nothing to understand. It's not sustainable. I don't know. There is no vision is kind of what I'm trying to say in my opinion. At this moment in time, I don't think there's a vision. I think there's just a short-term dollar signs, right? Because if you think about it, it really does not make any sense to just completely wipe out everyone's or most people's jobs and then what is the point of like, for example, like AI doing a bunch of stuff, like producing a bunch of product, producing a bunch of, the next coolest thing on Instagram. If like okay, Instagram is free. That's not a good example. But actually no, let's use Instagram. But no one can pay their phone bill and no one can pay their Wi-Fi bill and no one can use Instagram. Who cares? Right? Like that's like
Right.
a more digital example, but like that could be applied to anything. Like who cares what the next like trendy item is going to be because no one can afford it? So, I don't know, I feel like allegedly from what I've heard, a lot of I feel like corporate leaders are trying to frame this as, "This will enhance your work. This is
Mhm.
adding to your productivity. We're not gonna fire people. We just wanna get more done. We wanna basically, as a whole, boost the what's the word? Like, boost quote unquote productivity, right? But I don't know. I feel like, do you trust that? I have no idea. Like, who's to trust? Maybe there isn't even a single solid, like, universal vision for this. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it's definitely not sustainable at all.
Well, and so the optimistic view is that you know, we figure out ways to harness the technology
Sure.
and use that to our advantage, right? But that's made challenging what you just said about the rapid pace of change and no systemic plan on how to move affected people or the workforce onto other areas that they could concentrate in.
Right.
And I think that that is the concern from a societal stability standpoint, because I've heard examples, and these are valid examples. I mean, of I was listening to an interview with with Dr. What's his name, Neil Tyson deGrasse. Am I getting that
Neil
correct?
deGrasse
Right?
Tyson.
Okay, whatever. Sorry, no, I butchered that. Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was talking about how if you take a look at a picture of New York City in 1905, you might see like one car and 50 horse-drawn carriages, and if you look at it in 1915, just 10 years later, you maybe see one horse-drawn carriage and everything is full of cars. And he just like literally overnight, or what felt like overnight, an entire industry of buggies and whips and wheels and like just breeding horses for transport, like all of it just went away.
Right.
Okay, and a new industry was created. And that is true, but you needed factories to make the automobiles. And actually, that was a genius of whatever the myth that we learn about, right? Of Henry Ford and the assembly line. The genius of the assembly line was that you priced a product so that the people that worked the assembly line could actually buy the product that came off the assembly line. So you basically had this boost of productivity and consumption, and that was great. You're just not seeing that play out with the way AI is being rolled out. It is, why do you need paralegals? You can just get somebody to summarize, a 500-page document. And so I think that, along with, again, the white collar jobs that were traditionally thought to be immune from automation, are now all of a sudden very much in the hairlight. And so I think that's where the challenge comes in. Oh, maybe smart government policy will come and save us. I mean, that's kind
Hmm.
of the other problem. Maybe I'd be open to bots actually running Congress. Maybe that will actually, well, that's where we should invest some energy.
That's a really interesting point. I never even thought forget the content creator. I think
Yeah,
OpenAI should or any AI model should tackle government because actually if you think about it, is government or civil service anything but a bunch of optimization problems, and that's what
actually,
you
you know
know?
what? We might hit on something here. We should just create bots to run for Senate and for the House, even the president. I mean, how we can't get much worse than we got now. I mean, it's just like
Right. I
you
mean, they are
take out
bots.
human.
They are robots, just different kinds, but they're still controlled not by themselves, so
Yeah.
that's more of a
Um,
philosophical thing, but
yeah, that is, and that might be an insult to bots. But the thing is, if you take out the emotion and you take out, the hatred and the bigotry, all the things that actually make us human, and to your point of just replace that with efficiency of policy making and a technocratic solution, like that's actually what we need. And maybe we should be replacing government with bots and not necessarily software developers and paralegals
I mean,
and
I
lawyers.
would be interested to try that out, but I
Hmm.
feel like that's where people get all like, "Oh my gosh, it's a dystopia." But in general, like what if a model calculated that, hey, it would be more economically viable to spend money in X, Y, and Z ways, and people could have health insurance, and there would be
Right.
money to put into schools, and X, dot, 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 versus like whatever adjective or noun you want to use to describe what's going on now and has been going on. So who knows?
So it's interesting. We can actually pivot from there, because something else I'm thinking of, the reason that's going to face a lot of stiff resistance is because politics is designed to exert control over the masses. And frankly, the corporate system that we have right now is excelling in the same way. And that's why I believe you see the corporate powers that be pushing this, because it's a way to exert maximum control over a population. To what end? That is the ultimate question.
Right.
Because you might just do it to the end of destroying yourself. But typically, that's the negative side of human thinking and the the selfishness and the greed. You're basically destroying yourself, but as long as you're in power, it's like, the thought experiment of you're on a boat stranded out in the ocean in the middle of nowhere, but you're arguing about which direction you should row in. And people will get into a fight and try to kill each other for that, because that's the uniquely human behavior. That's what makes us unique
Yeah.
and humans,
Yeah,
right?
no.
So I think like the consolidation of power is playing a lot in this. But again, it's like the dystopian version of that is going back to all the bad science fiction movies where it's just like, again, I don't know if these franchises are even relevant anymore, but like the Mad Max franchise where people live in the sewers under in the gutters of New
I
York,
honestly never
or like,
even knew the premise of Mad Max, but I know the title.
okay, yeah, or there's Elysium, right? There's a super society that lives out in space and everybody else is
Okay.
stuck on a garbage Earth. So we're kind of in that realm.
Yeah,
Um, Go
it's
ahead.
fun. It's kind of disturbing if you think about it because, for example, like, there's such an emphasis or I don't even know who "they" is, but some people are saying, there's such an emphasis on
Many, many people.
many, many people, right? Like, especially in the US, oh, individual rights, me, this individualistic culture, right? But then we're all being controlled by a few people. And whether or not you agree about who those two people are, is it government? Is it CEOs? A mixture? Billionaires? Powerful people? Whatever you want to say, it is true that a very small minority do control, like, the big majority, and it's just so ironic because not everyone, but a lot of people I feel like are just so up in arms about, like, just these personal rights and my freedoms and this, but it's like, I feel like you're being kind of violated in general, but no one's really aware of it. Like, sure, like you're really into like the freedom to like wear what you want or to like have a gun, but in general, it kind of feels like, well, there are kind of bigger powers at play that are restricting you. And so it's almost like we are being told to focus on, oh, we're so free, but in reality, we're really not. I don't know if that made a lot of
No,
sense.
that's absolutely true. And the force that makes that possible is the centralization of money, and money is simply a proxy of power in the organized society that we live in. So in every industry, I don't think this is an exaggeration. I'm referencing a book that I've read recently, In Shitification. Um, Great book, putting it out there for anybody that's interested. But the point is that every industry is controlled by 3 to 5 companies,
Okay.
whether it's poultry farms, whether it's supply chain and grocery stores, auto parts. Think about cell phones. Like if Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, who am I missing? Like, name a couple of others. If they decided to shut off their cell towers, we're all hosed.
Yep.
You got no options. If supply chain stopped working and there was no delivery of Amazon, Walmart, Target, name a couple of others, where you can't live. And to your point of like, but we're fighting with each other about gender pronouns and like whether I should have a gun, and frankly, that's where the gun is probably the most realistic way to show any form of resistance, which is why people hang on to that. But even with that, it's almost like you can't you can have 10,000 rounds of ammo in your house. You'll probably run out of food and water before you run out of ammo. But it just what are you going to do at that point? And we saw that. Remember the pandemic? No toilet paper, no
Mhm.
water,
Everyone freaked
people
out.
panicking.
Yeah.
Everybody freaked out, and that was like a little taste of it. So you're right. It's the control. And so right now, that's the other big difference of AI and the AI revolution versus the internet revolution. Um, in that there's only a few small companies that are truly controlling the AI infrastructure because it takes billions of dollars
Right.
to build out that infrastructure and train the models. And so at the end, you're basically going to be just paying rent to those companies to exist. And those companies are not regulated. And I think like this is where legislation falls behind. Like electricity, water supply, these are things that are regulated, but AWS, and we had the outage with AWS, right? You were you affected at work
Yes.
when we had? Yes.
Yeah. Most people
It's just
were.
like
Yeah.
most people. It's like it's not if electricity went out, it's a big deal. It's part of the power grid. All the computing is just all privately held,
Yeah.
but everybody relies on it.
Yeah, and it's, historically, like, electricity or the water lines were not just like born being regulated, right? They used to be privately held, and telegraph companies and all the things that we think about that are like kind of now thought of as like kind of public utilities. Those were all privately owned and operated, but there were pushes, to fight after monopoly and to fight after like basically what was an unregulated space because it would be better for the consumer, better for the public. So I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, it is concerning because it's almost odd in a way because yeah, like basically the entire like most of the technological infrastructure was affected by the AWS outage a couple weeks ago. And what are you supposed to do about it? It doesn't even matter if you're the best engineer on your team or if you're a problem solver, a go-getter, you can literally like, you cannot do anything.
Yeah.
Unless you're on the response team at Amazon and you're an Amazon employee at AWS and you're on that specific team, me or you or anyone else working anywhere can't do anything. I was just sitting there at my desk. I couldn't do anything, like directly related to anything cloud related. So it is very odd to think about it like that because you think of yourself as being, especially in like an engineering space, like kind of constructive and doing things and able to kind of respond. But when power is so concentrated, even with our tools that we use, it
Yeah.
feels very off-putting that like you can't just fix your problem. Actually, it's not even your problem to fix because you're just a person, you're just a client, like, you're just a customer, you're not even, like, actually an owner of the product, you're just a customer. It's a very weird feeling.
So maybe this is a good way to wrap this up. I'm thinking, okay, so we gotta try to make an analogy on this. So here goes. So what it means to be human is to be able to produce unique output. But if you are you can be made unhuman by being made to be reliant on all the tools and the input that you need for that productivity. So maybe the AWS outage was a precursor of that. Is like you stop being human because you can produce anything. Whereas that's never really happened before. Because if you were sitting 1,000 years ago in the middle of a jungle, you could still, I don't know, go climb a tree or something. But when you're
Well,
sitting
I don't know, like, how I
okay, that was terrible.
because the thing is, I wasn't a not to bring the C word capitalism into this, but, like,
Mm.
I wasn't a productive and employee that day, for sure. I was
Yeah, yeah.
probably a waste of money for my employer, but I continued to, do what I continued to live my life as a human, if that makes sense, right? Like, I wasn't producing any profit, I wasn't being a worker, I wasn't doing X, Y, or Z, but I was drinking my coffee, I was talking to my coworkers, I ate lunch, and like did all the things that one does that, any AI agent is not going to do at work, right? So
Mm.
I don't know, like I think being productive is definitely like a human trait, but it's I don't know, like I feel like there's not going to be a clean analogy to this because at the same time, like so is tech and AI is productive. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, humans can write original thought. Well, maybe AI can come up with something new too. So I don't know. It's hard to
Mm.
say. I will say though that like for sure, though, this idea of, you know, the beginning and the end and being born and dying, like, I don't think any model can relate to that specifically. So, being sick,
That's
taking a day off of work, just like any of those kinds of just things that happen that are human. I know we keep on saying the word human and it's hard to even we're trying to define what it is and I'm using it, which is kind of a
Yeah.
cyclical problem, but it's there's no clean answer, but it's almost like the intuition of like, I know I'm human and I know that's not human. And sometimes it's almost like, I mean, I don't fully agree with this concept, but like Descartes, I think, therefore I am. It's like, okay, I know I'm human, therefore, like, I know that, but I see the AI and there's just a little bit, there's just something about it. I know it's not human. So sometimes it's just
Because it can gossip. If it can gossip, it can be human.
Seriously, it doesn't have that sense of fun or, OMG. It didn't had no idea what I was talking about, and I mean, I'm not surprised, but it was almost like an instinct because when I'm interfacing with the chat, maybe it's a generational thing, I'm very much, like, casual with it because it's almost like I'm chatting with someone or texting or messaging someone, but it is not a human on the other side. So I feel like that's the
Yeah.
main thing to keep in mind too with our expectations is, like, this is not gonna be a one-to-one thing of human to human interaction. It'll be its own kind of genre of interaction. So,
Okay.
it's its own thing.
Fair. Hopefully, we had a human interaction. I don't know. Were we bots or were we?
I
Uh,
mean,
you
our
know.
the jokes and the slang, I think, is giving us away. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for spending some time in the ozone. I hope you had fun, and we should do this again.
yeah, I had fun. That's something humans do. But yeah, I had fun and thank you for having me join.
Bye.
Bye.